your belief is that this is probably a simulation?
Most likely.
Oh, I see that. I feel it.
When I first saw the phenomenon, it was like, holy shit.
But then it was actually like, whoa, what is happening?
You have suggested that we are all collectively right now living in a simulation.
I don't know. The question of are we living in a simulation ourselves always boils down to, well, if we are living in a simulation, what are they living in? Because at some point there has to be some base reality.
Maybe there's a part of us that's outside the simulation, the player.
Mm-hmm.
And, my latest metaphor for this now is the writer's room. So, like in a TV show, they'll have a writer's room,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say, okay, we know what this character is going to do throughout the season. This is their arc.
Yeah.
This is kind of where they're going to end up. But let's figure out what we're going to do in each episode.
Okay, just tell me what you see.
Oh my God, come on. I showed over 100 people, and I kept asking myself, how are all of us seeing the same thing?
Niels Bohr, one of the founders of the field, said that if you are not shocked by the quantum theory, then you haven't understood it. Because it's telling us that until the observation happens, the decision about whether it's alive or dead hasn't really been made.
For centuries, mankind has attempted to explore these altered states, but we've never had a repeatable, testable phenomenon to observe until now.
Wow.
So you can see through the laser into another dimension.
I mean, I don't think I'm being played by somebody in a video game. But then people in video games don't generally think that.
The claim is, if you project a diffracted laser on the surface and you smoke DMT, you will see code running in surfaces. Yes, like in the Matrix.
If you talk to people who use the latest virtual reality equipment in sort of a big space where they sort of map like benches in the space to benches in the game and the environment, they have this experience when they do that for the first time and they take it off and then they just freeze for 10 seconds. And then you talk to them and it's clear that like their belief that this is actual reality has been shaken because they were so convinced in virtual reality that was real.
So there are a few possibilities. One,
I lost my mind, which is the coolest losing your mind ever in history.
The second option is that
this is the biggest discovery of humankind.
What percentage are you at in terms of believing that we are currently living in a simulation?
Very close to certainty.
If anybody ever asked themselves what it would be like to know you live in the Matrix for sure, well, I know for sure. Convinced.
So where do we go from here? All I know is
it's about to get crazy.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. We're going out of the Matrix into prime reality. Thanks for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Of course, our wonderful moderator, Raymond, a.k.a. Two Steps Behind. I don't know if Ronnie's in the room yet. Our second wonderful moderator. And, of course, my wonderful wife, Christine, as inspired in a live chat. All right, let's dive into it, friends. This has been, over the last years, one of the most triggering subjects that we talk about, the simulation, the matrix, the construct. And many times, I believe, we, and most everybody who studies this, is going about it sort of in a backwards way. We are a mind-based society at this point. And so our point of observation is very mind heavy. So we go into logic, we go into the mathematics of things, and we can find certain things through that for sure. And, while I am 99.9% certain that this is, well, to say it's a constructed reality, duh, of course it is, but that it is a simulated, which means something different. I do believe that this is not prime creation as we're experiencing it right now. So let me put it this way. And then you go into the spiritual traditions and the religious traditions, and in their own words, they say as much. Illusion, dream, shadow, Plato's cave, wherever you look, really, they're hinting at something. But I have found that it is sort of like reverse engineering. So when we can't find these dots to connect in our own realities, we cannot understand the abstract idea of a technological or any other kind of construct that is supposedly, allegedly, evidently built around us. And what do I mean by that? Well, I have been asking myself over the last years is what points at simulation? Because there was a clip in this intro, if you look at this, and you might have heard of this, where a group of people, and they repeated this experiment. They would point the laser at a surface, they would smoke DMT, and under the influence they could all see code symbols in that laser light on a surface, basically what we perceive to be material reality reflecting a code back to them, literally like in the Matrix. And I haven't tried it for myself, but I'm tempted, of course. And so when we look at these things, they point at something. However, what almost nobody asks themselves is, how many processes are we ourselves simulating? See, I look at patterns. Christine and I, we're patterns researchers. Patterns show us and tell us something about ourselves. So what we see is that we are creating ourselves every single day, simulations within simulations within simulations within simulations. Every time that we gain a new possibility, usually it's technological, every time we make a new advancement, we use it to simulate something, right? And after a while, we forget that it's a simulation. We just accept it as this new form of creation. But it's simulating something that existed in a different form before. That's the simulacrums, the simulacra that were explored before. And I want to explore just a few with you today, so we can reverse engineer the intention and make it clear to ourselves. Because this is the beauty of anything that we create. Any song that we write, any piece of furniture that we create, any video that we put out, any book that's being written, anything that's created informs us about our consciousness. When we go back and observe our creations, believe it or not, we learn about ourselves through that. Usually more than we do during the creation. We learn more from the observation. And observation is a key point in this entire conversation, as it would appear that reality without an observer, the way that we see it, doesn't exist in a solidified form. So every single thing that I've been studying, every single tradition, every single quantum physics theory, and everything in between always points me back to me. Everything always points back. So the point of view, the point of observation, that's where we need to start. So what can we observe? What can we know? Let's talk about the can knows, okay? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one here. Let's remove this. There we go. So in our world, believe it or not, most everything that most people live in is simulated, and it begins with emotions. Feelings and emotions. So we're taught how to feel and when to feel. Like, sadness at funerals, happiness at birthday parties, pride when we achieved something, or when others achieved something, or we feel, sort of patriotic during an anthem. These are all programmed feelings. There's very rarely a child that will hear an anthem for the first time and automatically feel pride. They might feel moved by the music in a natural way, but pride is a specific feeling. And very rarely will you see a small child that has no concept of a casket feel sadness when they look at a wooden box. But what do we feel when we see a wooden box? Shock, sadness, some sort of programmed emotion. When we see a celebratory setting, we go into the state of happiness, not because we're necessarily happy, but because that's the associated program. It's a simulated feeling. And we have learned and gotten accustomed to simulated feelings. We simulate the feeling, and we have the ability to do that. We can simulate something, and when we do it enough, it almost feels real. How many people have faked sadness at a funeral? A lot of people that didn't like the person that passed away, but they didn't want everybody else to know that they didn't like them, so they faked sadness. And so our world is very much, when you think about it, there is a certain demeanor that is expected in each situation in our world. Like I say, when people would start showing up at funerals laughing, that would be extremely inappropriate. Doesn't fly usually in most cultures. When people go to a celebration and they wear, dark and cry and are sad, that's very odd. So we have this construct of feelings that begins to inform us that there are constructs that are in place that make us inauthentic to ourselves, which is a form of simulating something. Okay, so it's, people call it faking it, whatever you want to call it, but it is a form of a simulation. We do this too with environments, which is the biggest takeaway. I've said this before. What is a shower? A shower is a simulation of a waterfall. What is a bathtub? It's a simulation of a hot spring, or, a smaller version of a pond or of a lake, right? And on these things go, but we don't see that any longer. We perceive this to be the reality that we live in. Duh, everybody has a shower in their home. That's normal. Everybody has running water, which all of these artificial environments are simulations of natural reality as we find it when we arrive here. Now, we found very little of it compared to our ancestors, but still. So then we put scents in candles. We create all kinds of little simulations. And in the beginning, they're a novelty. And we sort of realize that it's, copying something. But after 10, 15, 20 years, we don't realize that any longer. We are caught up in the next stage of the simulation. And that's when I say that we have this, either it's programmed into us, that could be one reason, or because this entire matrix entices us to do it, we have this incredible need to simulate things. For some reason, we go through a lot of trouble to rearrange the nature as we find it, rather than enjoy it as it is. We'll go and we'll visit. We now say, oh, I spent an hour in nature today, and it's like it's a vacation from what? A vacation from the simulation that you live in. Cities, any city, and even the smaller village to a large degree, are completely simulated environments. Nothing in those environments is real or necessary or needed. In the bigger sense of things. And we talk about this quite a lot, but a city is a perfect example of how we simulate. And then people within cities go into even deeper simulations. They visit, enclosed rooms without windows and put on headsets to go into another layer of a virtual reality. And at this point, I would like to show you something which is called Genie 3 before we move forward here. And Genie 3 is Google's newest world creation, world simulation AI program. And before we watch this little clip here, it's like a promo clip for it. I would encourage you to keep in mind that if this is what's being released to us, how much further along this development is. But let's look at this here for a little bit.
What you're seeing are not games or videos. They're worlds. Each one of these is an interactive environment generated by Genie 3, a new frontier for world models. With Genie 3, you can use natural language to generate a variety of worlds and explore them interactively, all with a single text prompt. Let's see what it's like to spend some time in a world. Genie 3 has real-time interactivity, meaning that the environment reacts to your movements and actions. You're not walking through a pre-built simulation. Everything you see here is being generated live as you explore it. And Genie 3 has world memory. That's why environments like this one stay consistent. World memory even carries over into your actions. For example, when I'm painting on this wall, my actions persist. I can look away and generate other parts of the world. But when I look back, the actions I took are still there. And Genie 3 enables promptable events, so you can add new events into your world on the fly. Something like another person, or transportation, or even something totally unexpected. You can use Genie to explore real-world physics and movement, and all kinds of unique environments. You can generate worlds with distinct geographies, historical settings, fictional environments, and even other characters. We're excited to see how Genie 3 can be used for next-generation gaming and entertainment. And that's just the beginning. Worlds can help with embodied research, training robotic agents before working in the real world, or simulating dangerous scenarios for disaster preparedness and emergency training. World models can open new pathways for learning, agriculture, manufacturing, and more. We're excited to see how Genie 3's world simulation can benefit research around the world.
There we go. So this is Google's newest world simulation tool, and if you study the people behind it and the people that have been advocating for these things and the why, right? The big why. Well, number one is what I just said, is we have this incredible need to simulate things, but there's a bigger picture emerging, which is the plan, which is now being implemented to reset or start a new simulation within the one that we're currently living in, which then will be under the control completely of the people that are running it on this side of things. So, it has been proposed at these, world government meetings and World Economic Forum meetings and everywhere that travel in the future for most people will not be physical any longer. They won't jump on a plane, they won't go on a train or in a car. They'll just put on their headset and do a virtual vacation. But because it will be so indistinguishable to the experiencer, it will be, to them, it will feel like the same experience. And so we're looking, or we are maybe the last generation, and maybe we're fooling ourselves too, that might be a possibility, that has the ability to see this and still distinguish it. We still have sort of dots that allow us to make this a certain judgment or discern. When that is fully implemented, that might not be possible any longer, and the lines will be extremely blurred. So I want to move a little further in this presentation here on what it is all that we're simulating, not just environments like I just talked about, although this is such a huge one. We're if you really break this down, our lives are spent to a large degree in simulated environments, which of course we don't see that as such any longer. But if you walk through a home, an apartment, a house, and look at the appliances and the devices, they're all simulating something. Like, the light bulb is simulating the sun, and the air vents that we put into homes and the fans are simulating the airflow and the wind and temperature, right? We're conditioning environments with temperature, with air conditioning, heating. We're making all these things, and these are all mini simulations that we live in that we call our reality. And after a while, we are not aware that these are simulations any longer. We only see that, there's very few opportunities for that any longer, where indigenous people that still live somewhat undisturbed or have never been contacted, of which there might not be many left any longer. When they are contacted and they see any kind of tool that we use, a camera or anything else, their bewilderment, their complete astonishment, and naturally, how did they look at us? To them, we are clearly, because once you show them the ability of a camera, what it can do, or of a phone, for example, you show them a screen and how to them, you are some kind of god, either a bad god or a good god. They decide that on the spot, but you're some kind of god. And in the same context, I would like to suggest that if you turn back time for 1,000 years, and let's presume that our technological stage at that point was very low, and most people didn't have a clue about technology because another civilization had been wiped out and they lived very simply. If someone had visited them that would have an iPhone or a screen like that, an iPad or any kind of smart device, and had AI at their fingertips, wouldn't that visitor appear like a god? Wouldn't they appear as a godlike figure in what they can create? I mean, I'm just putting this out there as a thought. We simulate value, right? We use money, which is purely pure abstraction. Money is not tied to any real asset, anything. It's not tied to food. It's not tied to precious metals any longer. It's not tied to anything. It's a pure fiction. It's pure belief, make believe. And because we believe in it, we use it, right? And we have gone from using metals like gold and silver and copper. We've used these metals because they presented value to certain groups of people. When we trace it, back far enough, we're pretty certain that it is important for a different species that came here, and that the mining of gold was extremely important to them. But we accepted it as a valuable physical representation. And then we went from the valuable physical representation, or the valuable physical asset, gold or silver, to certificates, which were pieces of paper that were tied to that gold and silver. And then we went to pieces of paper that were tied to nothing, which is your dollar, your euro, your whatever currency you're at. It's tied to nothing other than belief. And now we've progressed to digits on a screen that we believe in. And when they show up on our screen, it's a good thing. And when they show up or leave our screen, it's a bad thing. And so this is a complete simulation of value of anything that is necessary or needed. It's a belief system, which is so important in this conversation. And then look at most of the work. Work used to be a necessity, and a certain amount of labor, of energy that was put into a process in order to receive some necessity for life. Whether you were pulling up water from a well or from a stream, that kind of labor allowed you to drink. When you went out on a hunt, and when the men went out on a hunt, they put in labor. They walked, they waited, they carried animals, they killed them. That was the kind of work that produced necessity or needed foods, waters, whatever, shelter. Most jobs today are detached from necessities. They are non-essential services. And so a significant amount of our lifetime is invested in work that creates more and more of those simulated things, of simulated services, simulated environments, simulated everything. So what I'm trying to explain here and show is that we have this need for some reason to simulate things. So how difficult is it then to imagine that if this possibility, if the technological possibility exists, that it would be used? It's not difficult to imagine. And for some reason, people think this is such a big stretch that if you can, through whatever means necessary, actually, if you can simulate it, why then would that be the exception? Because I can't think of a single field in our world today that doesn't have some form of simulation to attach to it, or more than that. But here we go, and here we have to sort of explore our own consciousness to realize that we are the ones perpetuating and running these simulations. And this is why we have been saying for so long, where is our starting point? How do we get back to a 0 point from which we can observe more clearly, from which we can see more clearly? Even freedom, by the way, is simulated. And I just wanted to share this too, that the choices that we're being presented, parties, religions, narratives, clubs, whatever, are all pre-created simulations of freedom and sovereignty, but not the real thing. They're not actual freedom and sovereignty. Like liberty. Liberty is what is usually being used because it's a regulated form of freedom and a simulated form of freedom, but not a real one. But so that the 0 point that we can return to, and this is how I think our exploration should actually happen. When we come here in this reality, there is a system in place that, this system we generally call nature, that we can observe, learn from, and find our natural place in. The interesting thing is that we as a species have all but forgotten how to do that instinctively versus, all other species who just find their place in it. They just know. Like, how does a foal that was just born know how to run? Doesn't have to learn it. It just jumps on its feet and runs, right? And one instinct that's still there is every newborn will go for the mother's breast. In any species where there's a breast, they'll go for it. That's one of the few instincts that's still alive in us. But when we reharmonize with the processes of the nature as we find it, we get to the essential observable truth, and the only observable truth with our senses. Everything else is not truth. A skyscraper is not truth. A road is not truth. A car is not truth. None of these things are truth. And all of these things are temporary. Like, for example, cars. 100 years from now, cars will not exist. I'm fairly certain. Maybe it will be a relic of the past. There'll be a few, but as a form of transportation, they will be meaningless in 100 years from now. And so cars are not real. They're not truth. They're a temporary phenomenon of our beliefs and how we externalize them. But when we return to the most natural processes, we get into a rhythm. We get into a state of coherence. And from there, we can observe things for what they actually are. And I think that from that standpoint, we will see very, very clearly that this is an illusion, a dream, a construct. And I'm not saying for now whether it's good or bad and whether it's for us or against us. We have to get to a neutral observation point and realize who we are in it. And as long as we continue to perpetuate the simulations and create more and more of them, how can we ever see the truth? Because we're distancing ourselves more and more from it. It's also causing this phenomenon of atrophy, where every ability that we have, when it's not used, goes away. Our brain shuts down that center. So where people could calculate and do certain calculations in their heads 50, 60, 70 years ago, the average person that had, basic education could do it. Today they can't. Like, the kids can't do it. I mean, many kids struggle to tell you 10% of 100, right? Because they never had to do it, and that part of the brain shut down. And it's the same with everything else. The more that we simulate, the less we have to do it ourselves. And we've talked about this, Greg Braden shared this, that specifically with the use of AI, we're losing abilities at a never before seen rate. Because when you let an AI write something for you that you used to write, whether that's an article or a book, which many authors now do, they co-write with the AI, they lose the ability to do it themselves. And after a while, it becomes all but impossible. So that's why we have to return to those more natural states. And I think it's imperative. I think it's the quest and the calling of our time that we answer those questions. Who are we? Where are we? Why are we here? What's the real purpose of this? Now, in my perception, and this is just going to be my opinion, what I have found, and this is through reading of books, talking to other researchers, through meditations, through contemplations and thinking. This is purely my opinion, is that number one, without our participation, our belief, and our active imagination of things, this reality couldn't exist in the form that it does. It needs our attention. It needs our observation. It needs our participation. So I think we're ultimately, if we are not the projectors of this reality, we are amplifying the projection. If the projection comes from someplace else, we're for sure amplifying it very, very strongly. But I believe that all of these traditions and now newfound teachings about Earth as a school where you learn, where you evolve, where you're here to evolve your and work off your karma, and then you go to the next realm, and then you can start there and then higher karma, and then at some point you end up in what they call the nirvana or heaven. I believe that these constructs are not leading or rooted in prime reality. I believe these are sophisticated constructs that people can enjoy and souls can enjoy and move from one world to another and have these experiences. But I don't think these are prime reality constructs. I don't think that karma is a prime reality construct. I believe karma is a operating system. I believe religion is a part of the operating system, and religion has well, let me rephrase this. Most aspects of religion, teaching, stories, folklore, most have no basis in reality outside of this realm. They're operating systems for this realm to keep this construct going in a certain way. I don't think when you actually return to prime, to origin of creation, to that source consciousness, that religion plays any role whatsoever. Neither does karma. So we can wonder whether these conversations are good, are necessary, whether they're a hindrance. However, if we can come to the preliminary conclusion that this is some form of construct that is finite, that has boundaries, that operates under certain rules, then we must ask the next question: who created it and why? Right? Did we create it? Did our did we in the future create it, or in a more advanced state create it? Did we in a distant past create it? Why are we running them? Why are simulations being run? Is it to solve a problem? What if, and I'm putting this question out, what if you exit? You make an exit, this life is over, you've lived 90 years, 100 years, whatever, and you are in one aspect, in one dimension of the other side, of which there are more than one, and you have a reflection on this, and you look at it and you realize that a moment has passed since you've last been in that dimension, but 100 years have gone by in this reality. So a simulation would also almost always include a distortion, a compression, or an invention of time, much like a video game. In a video game, you can go through worlds and stages much, much faster than in real life, right? So what if you live here for 100 years, you come out and it's only been an instant on the other side, and you remember that, and you realize, oh, damn, none of this was really real. This was just all a game, all a play, all a stage, and we took it all so seriously, and we got so invested in these things, and oh my God, I gave 70 years to the party. I rooted for this one politician guy over and over again. I prayed that he was going to be my savior, or whatever stories we concoct, whatever things we make up, and we realize that we have steered away from the truth. So this to me is the eternal quest, is to come back to origin, because there is a truth. And this is perhaps the most dangerous part about our time, is that it would appear that truth doesn't really exist, that it's just whatever is your truth, whatever is the current version that you find, and that there is no truth, that there is nothing real. And I don't believe that. I keep finding that there's certain things in my experience that are eternal, that stay the same, that are real and truthful. And we have to basically shut out 99% of everything that we've been ever taught and shown, and return to that coherent state where our heart, our minds, our brains, our spirit, our soul are in an alignment. And what we can feel when that happens is so vastly different than our experience in the world out there. So the more and the more people that would do that, which is basically, it's why meditation exists. It's why monks do it. And the perception of reality of the monk that meditated for 20 years is so vastly different than that of the other people. But he's still, he's still in this world, but he knows so much less about the worldly stuff and so much more about the real stuff. So this is an encouragement that when we obsess about sort of how is this technologically possible, who is doing this, and we give that so much power, we forget the most important part, is that we're endowed with the co-creator spirit. And so we can never, ever be a victim to anything, not even this simulation, not even a construct, not even a fake reality, unless we give consent to it. But knowing this on a mental level is completely different than experiencing this. So you have to experience this power. And so then that we realize clearly our vision must be to transcend any and all limitations, right? Our vision clearly must be to transcend the limitations of any kind of prism that there is, psychological, spiritual, physical, whatever it is, and return to the full embodiment of the fullness of what we are. That has to be the quest. If that's not the quest, then you're just in the game forever. And okay, that's a choice, and if it's a valid choice for someone. So All of these explorations teach us about one thing. And whether you want to believe in the physical existence of Jesus Christ or simply the as portrayed, or simply the true teachings that were presented by numerous beings over time, which all point us within. And it shows us the portals. These teachings show us the portals. They teach us the portals. They teach us that if we do certain things, if we breathe in certain ways, if we become still, if we focus on certain things, dimensions open, portals open, realizations come, knowings appear, and we transcend our current form of seeking and exploration, which is mental. The mental is but one aspect of our being. It's not that it isn't important, but it is not the essential one. It's the aspect that allows us to interpret what we see, but it is not the essential one. And so this is the true seeking. And in the same breath, it's also the true finding. You know, when you are like the teacher said, when you sit still and you breathe and you do this and you practice this, you remember how it's done. Truth comes to you. It's truth that nobody can mess with any longer because you experience it. And then, and this is the most important piece that I'm going to share, and then I'm going to stop this for today. However powerful you think MK Ultra is, however powerful you think the intra-body and body area networks are, however powerful you think that technologies are that interfere with our minds and our bodies are, however powerful you think that fluoride and chemtrails and pesticides and EMFs and all the other stuff are, they are nothing, absolutely nothing compared to that power that you then experience. And the truth is in the evidence, the proof is in the pudding. Because if it weren't so, they wouldn't have to do that. If that was not the truth, they would never have to go to you know, they would never have to do all of this. They would never have to bombard and attack us in such incredibly pervasive ways. If there wasn't dormant a power that frightens the living Satan out of them. And the them is ultimately another form of us. Ultimately, them is another form of us. So when we explore simulation, matrix, construct, we must, I believe, in my opinion, do it by expanding our consciousness far enough so that the truth enters our field rather than we trying to bend and manipulate information into our field. We need to expand so far that the truth automatically comes into our field. And I believe that's what a lot of people are doing. That's why they're stepping within. They know, they feel the call. And from that, I believe a whole new truthful way of life will emerge. We might overcome the amnesia altogether. We might disable the veil of forgetfulness. Simply disable it. Who says that's not possible? It's an artificial thing. It's a completely artificial, arbitrary rule that we have to go through a veil of forgetfulness and forget everything else just to exist here. It's just a rule somebody put there. We agreed to it. Now we can disable that rule. We can disable that mechanism. We just have to make sure that we're in a state where it serves us. That we are in a state where we can actually live with all that knowing in a truthful way, not in a vengeful way, not use it against others. So who says we can't do that? I think we can. And some people are. Some people are born and remember a lot. So that's a really interesting journey. That's what I'm interested in. And that's where the triumph for me lies, you know. That's how we triumph. Because if you think about it, if we're now operating at a few percent of our capabilities for various reasons, and we scale that up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, well, all the problems are taken care of. At least that's how I see it. All right, friends. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being with us. I would encourage you to, do some breath work every morning, go within, see what you can find, see what you can feel, and some powerful truths might emerge from that. We'll be back very soon.
Your environment shapes everything, your thoughts, your health, your energy, but most people never question the invisible field they live in. We did, and that's when FLFE found us. It's not a product, it's a field of pure life force energy that lifts everything it touches. We now live in it 24/7, and we would love to invite you to experience it too. Start your free 15-day trial now. No pressure, no strings attached. Just the truth, resonance, and peace.